Welcome to another Solo Battles replay. This time, I'm replaying Battle of 5 Armies by Armies Games. Now I think this game works great for solo. I call it two-fisted double blind because there are cards involved. But when I say double blind, I mean I play each side as though it had no idea what the other side had in its hand. Games that are too heavily dependent on hidden knowledge don't work well for this. But most games can easily accommodate this, in my opinion. Now this isn't another how to play video. There are lots of videos out like that. If you want to know how the game system works, check one of those out. I'm here to show you how much fun it is to play, and how it plays very well as a double-blind, two-fisted solo. Now to keep the narrative flowing, to move the video along, I don't carefully recount each and every step of every turn. I include enough information to allow you to follow along and keep the thread of the narrative alive. Alright, now enough jibber jabber. Let's get into it. Now this first turn I've drawn a 2 fate token, which allows Bilbo to enter play on a character die. And I've drawn the eagles are coming, so there's 2 eagles in the eagle's eyrie. I use a character die and place Bilbo at the eastern ford. At the end of the first turn, the shadow player did not get the movement dice it needed to advance as much as he'd like. We'll have to see how this affects him in the game. We're on to the next turn, which begins with event and story cards being drawn. This might be a very short game. The shadow player had 2 draws of the fate tokens, and both tokens were 3. So the fate marker advances to 5, and Thorn will be coming out next turn. Alright, now I realized I was mistakenly rolling all 6 dice for the Free People's player. That was last turn. I should only have rolled 5. So this turn, I'm only rolling 4 for them. Now when I rolled the dice this turn for the shadow player, I rolled 4 lidless eyes. This will be a lot of goblin action. Now the Free People's player played the rescue card, which allows them to place and flip a token and then make a rally roll. Well, they didn't need to rally, there's no damage being done yet, but this allowed them to place an elite dwarf on this eastern shore. The shadow player uses a bat cloud to move this army along and threaten the eastern spur. And now they play a shower of arrows card. All 3 of these armies can reach that orc army. That allows them to roll 5 dice and they're hitting on 4s or better. Although they only get 1 hit. Now again, I use these red crystals that I bought at a craft store to mark wounds. I find the triangular shaped damage chits really futzy to manage. Although I do use them to mark the damage on the various fortifications. And now the Fellowship, with their last action die, play Dismay, which removes all leadership tokens from one army. We'll take this army right here. And then if the shadow player has one unused action die with a character result, they have to discard it. And they do, and that really bites because they were going to use it to attack with the goblins, which they've now filled up. Both goblin armies are full and boiling over the passes. Now we begin the third turn. Now this turn the fate draw left the shadow player with 1 and a fate card. 1 is enough to activate Thorn, but we knew he was coming out. And the fate try allows him to use his mighty strokes, and that makes Thorn very devastating in combat. The shadow player plays a great goblin card. This allows him to place the great orc with the goblin army, along with the leadership token, and attack with it. They do. This time the brave elven spearmen hold up the army and fall back. They did take 1 hit, but they lived and they're going to get there to delay a rush towards Ravenhill. And the Free People's player abandons Fallen Bridge to concentrate his forces. And the goblin hordes attack. The goblin assault does 4 damage. The stout elven defenders do 1 damage. The goblins played their goblin cards, so they do 1 damage to themselves and 1 more damage to the enemy. That's 5 damage on 3 figures. And after taking casualties, the elves have 1 spearman and a damage token, and they fall back to Ravenhill. For Ravenhill, Gandalf hits them with a blast of magic, doing 4 damage. And that pretty much takes the threat out of the goblin horde. Gandalf falls back to gather up more archers. Goblins capture Fallen Bridge and menacingly move out of the pass in the mountains. And like a hero of old, Gandalf shows up with the archer reinforcement of the elves that he's gathered. The shadow player plays Gather and Marshal, placing and flipping a recruitment token in the goblin army. It's wargs. Now we have 6 figures in this army, and that's too many. But they remove a figure and 2 damage tokens, simulating strengthening the army and carrying off the wounded. Though, with goblins, they just left them. And now the goblin army attacks Eastern Spur. Because they have great orcs, they have terrain advantage. First, the Lakemen let loose a volley of arrows, causing 2 hits. Now the orcs and great orcs attack the Eastern Spur. They have to destroy the 3 defensive tokens first, and that requires 6s. So they've played no quarter, which adds 1 to their die roll. But that is to no avail. The Dwarven veterans show their mettle. The Free Peoples inflict 4 damage and remove Dark Player Leadership token from that army. It is enough for the orcs to call off the attack. And the Fellowship player has forgot to bring on Thorin this turn. But things are going pretty good in their favor, so it's not the end of the world. Next turn. What does Fate allow? Allows the Fate marker to move 1 space on the Fate track. And the Fate card. The Fate card is Where Are the Eagles? That places another eagle in the box and moves the Windlord 1 space to the left, which is on top of the Fate marker, thus activating the eagles. Now it'll take the eagles an extra turn to get there because he's activated this turn, but at the beginning of next turn I can place a leadership token on his card and that will bring him out. And when he begins, there'll be a total of 4 eagles. Ouch! 5 including himself. With the eagles looming and all his battles faring poorly so far, the shadow player admits defeat. As often happens in this game, you don't have to draw it out to the very end. Now you could, to see how it actually ends. They could keep fighting, but at this point, with the eagles coming, and Thorin will also come out. When he comes out, a lot of troops appear. So anyway, I'm calling the game at this point. The Free Peoples have held out. Let me know what you think in the comments below.